Politicians and celebrities make deals behind closed doors, promises broken, and their income soars. Hidden agendas run the grand parade. In the circus, choose a masquerade. Believe me, I wouldn't lie. I've been given money, power, and fame to keep you in line.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast on health, happiness, and beauty. Today, we're here with Kayse Gehret, a 30-year veteran in healing arts, founder of Microdosing for Healing, and a mentor to other healers. So she's here to talk about transforming health through microdosing and community. Welcome, Kayse.
Oh, thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
Before we begin, could you give us like a brief synopsis of your journey into this field?
As much as I can. A journey it was, yes. So I've been in the healing arts for, as you said, 3 decades now, and I studied lots of different things. My founding of my practice was in body work. So I was a somatic practitioner, massage therapist for many years, and then went on to study many different things, open studios, diverse healing arts studios. And I came across microdosing. And that was very appealing to me in that it's sub-perceptual. You kind of stay in the earth realm. I was always wary of drugs growing up because I had a grand mal seizure disorder. And so I kind of shied away from kind of messing with my brain, for lack of a better word. But I was intrigued by doing this small subperceptual dosing. And as soon as I did, my seizures ceased. And I also received a whole host of other incredible benefits. And so when the pandemic shut my studios down, and I was left with, what can I do without touching people? We can't gather right now. I put together a pilot program of groups to microdose together and move through this experience. And that was 2020. And since then, we've had now 29 groups through and over 1,100 people through our microdosing programs. That brings us to today.
So what exactly is microdosing? What are you doing?
So microdosing, you can microdose a lot of different things, but microdosing in kind of our modern context is taking small subperceptual doses of a psychedelic. Typically, people are talking about mushrooms or LSD, although there are a lot of plant medicines and earth medicines that you can work with on a small basis. I myself specialize in mushrooms, so the focus of our work in our community is working with earth medicines and mushroom medicine.
So who is microdosing for? Who benefits from this the most?
So many people. It's very few people who would not benefit from it at this point. So it's very diverse and applicable to all kinds of backgrounds and intentions. So people come for physical healing, mental health reasons, emotional regulation, which is up for everybody right now. Having trouble with sleep is also up right now. But also people just want it for personal growth, better relationships, better relationship to self, and also spiritual discovery. So lots and lots of different reasons to come.
Are there any ethical considerations that you have to keep in mind when you want to start a microdosing practice?
I wouldn't say there's an ethical issue. There's a legal issue.
Yeah.
Right now, unfortunately. That's the biggest obstacle, honestly. And it's frustrating. The farther you get in your practice, it just becomes more and more absurd that this was ever made illegal in the first place. One, it's so safe, it's so natural, and it's nature. We are part of nature. Nature is us, and it's so deeply healing in so many ways. And it really gets to the root of people's healing versus kind of the symptomatic fixes that we're in right now in this paradigm. So that being said, it was made illegal back in the 60s, and it's very hard to undo laws once they're in place, and it's very hard to undo stigma and propaganda once it's in place. So it's happening, though. Decrim efforts are underway all over the United States, all over the world. There are places that are farther ahead than others right now, but it's really a people-powered movement from what I have witnessed and seen. Like if you ask me, I live in a place where it's not legal, but when I stack against like all of the life-changing, transformative benefits I have received, it's been worth it. It's very much my healing practice and my spiritual practice at this point.
So how hard is it to get a hold of? How do you source it, and how do you know it's safe?
Great question. So 5 years ago when we started, it was quite a thing. That was the number one question is like, how in the world do I find this and where do I find it ethically and sourced well with organically? And so it was much harder. And so when we first started 5 years ago, we taught people how to grow their own. So that's something that's available to people, and people don't know it's really easy to grow mushrooms. You just need a tiny space. They grow indoors. It's like the size of a shoebox, and it's really fun. And it's fun in the same way that it's fun to grow your own herbs or your own garden and kind of have that relationship with your food and your medicine. So that was the best way 5 years ago, but the field has grown so much in the last 4 or 5 years that now there's a whole host of people cultivating at a very, very high level. And it's really just talking to people, meeting guides you trust, friends of friends. And ideally, I always say, like, know your farmer if possible in all cases. Like, the closer you are to the earth and the people that are growing, because the source seed really, really matters in your result.
And is this illegal in every state or just a few states? I mean,
Most yeah, most states. It's so hard it's growing in such a organic mycelial way, which kind of fits, right? So state by state, it's a different scenario, and also city by city, like towns, like small towns across the country are passing decrim movement. So there's like in every state, there's like pockets of places that are decriminalized. Um, right now, as it stands, Oregon and Colorado are kind of leading the way in terms of a statewide level, and they're still kind of working out all the kinks of how it all works with legalization models. But I myself support a decrim effort, particularly when it comes to microdosing, because it is so safe at a microdosing level, and it's the benefits so far outweigh any kind of detriment that can be done.
So, as far as the medical community goes, would you say like it's getting better to talk about these things with your doctors?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Great question. It's really exciting to see. So I noticed this huge shift the summer of 2022. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden I had all of these doctors pouring into my programs. It's like, what is going on? And they all said it's because our clients and the patients keep asking us about it and for it, and when they want to know if it's right for them. And they also said, honestly, we kind of need the support too at this point. It was really, really hard on anyone in healthcare on the front lines and during the pandemic. A lot of burnout, a lot of trauma. And so lots and lots of doctors started coming in to learn about it for themselves, but also experience the benefits for themselves too, which has been beautiful to witness. Lately, lots and lots of doctors are very, very vocally supportive of psychedelic medicines, both at a high dose level and microdosing as well. So yeah, there's a lot of momentum from the medical community. It's been beautiful to see.
So, what if the person is on, let's say, prescription medications and they want to microdose? Or what happens if they get a migraine? Can they take stuff for pain when they're microdosing? Like, what are the interactions that they need to be aware of?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So it's common, most people are on something at some time. If not a prescription, you take over the counter things. So we have a pharmacist that we collaborate with, that we have available to our community when these questions come up. It's very possible to microdose and be on prescriptions, but it's a case by case. So we always ask people to consult with a pharmacist, and especially if they plan to taper off of their prescription drugs, with the support of microdosing and community is very, very common. I love that you used the example of migraine. So mushroom medicine is actually very, very effective for migraines and cluster headaches of all kinds. So a lot of times, yes, it's one of the tippy top things that brings people to microdosing. And it's been remarkable healing from those things. So that's a great example to bring up.
Okay, that's nice. So, how does it work on the brain and the body? Do we know what mechanisms are happening?
We do. We do. So to use a graphic that most people appreciate is, imagine a snow-covered mountain, right? And so most of us over the course of our lives, the older we get, we ski down the same track over and over again. That's kind of the metaphor of our minds. when we have psilocybin, it opens up new pathways. And so it kind of gives us a fresh coat of snow over that mountain. And we're free to go down all of these new pathways that we've never explored before. So it's so deeply healing once we have an expanded awareness of ourselves, our relationships, of our lives. Everything shifts. Everything. We're just kind of looking at the world through a completely different lens. So it plays on our 5,2-HTP receptor, is how it works with the brain and actually in the gut too. We actually have many more 5,2-HTP receptors in our gut than we do in our brain. So it's a full body thing, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It touches all parts of us.
I'm trying to think of who would benefit, because a lot of my audience, they're women and they have hormone problems and maybe they have high stress and cortisol. Like, would this be a way that we can maybe, like, if we're chronic stress addicts, like rewire everything so that we can just chill?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I would say that's most of my clients too. I would describe it that way. I would also add they tend to be very highly sensitive, empathic people. So there's multiple things going on. So yes, with microdosing, the things that people tend to notice right away, usually within days or the first few weeks, is a sense of calm and peace that they haven't experienced before. And it's different than kind of a coffee uplift. It's more sustained and calm. And that's, I think, the deep nervous system healing that psilocybin has. It relaxes our nervous system as well as brings us into presence. So most of us, when we think of like what's causing things, most times it's either rumination, we're looping about the past, or we're stressing about the future. Right? One of two things. And so when we're brought into presence, we alleviate a lot of our symptoms just quite naturally and effortlessly.
So how often are people microdosing? Let's say like you have like chronic stress or something, or maybe you have some trauma and you're trying to just chill out to like deal with or like get over the hump of it or whatever. How long do people normally do this?
Great question. So we tend to work when people are first starting out with a protocol. Just because of our human monkey minds, we do well with structure, right? We kind of need something to focus and grip onto. So by a protocol, I mean kind of we'll determine kind of like a prescription at the outset where people are dosing, say, 3 days a week, 5 days a week. And it'll be different for each individual person, like what they're wanting to work on, what their dose is, what strain they're working with. We help people as a guide and as a community. We help people reflect and kind of focus on their protocol. People in my programs tend to do a 6-week cycle. And that's after 6 weeks, you're kind of just scratching the surface of how you're feeling and what kind of benefits you're experiencing. Most people will dose continuously on a protocol for about 3 months, and then most people will take a break for a time. So it's not one of the things that's very counterintuitive to people and our conditioning is the goal of microdosing is to not to need to microdose at all. So it's not something like a prescription you're going to keep doing, like an antidepressant every day. And so it's a little shocking to people because they'll have such gains and healing happen. And then they go to take a break and they're like, am I going to slide backward? Or like my headache's going to come back? Are my symptoms going to come back? And then they don't. And you kind of move into a deeper level of self-trust that it's not really the mushrooms that are doing it to you. It's what was within you all the time. It's just the mushrooms are that little key and that catalyst to give us that healing boost that we need.
So, I mean, I like a lot of us have heard these horror stories of people who they call it like one-shotting, where like they take some sort of like psilocybin, but they take maybe too much and then they never like come back. And that's what a lot of people worry about when we talk about these things. They're like, I don't know, I know a guy and he never was the same.
We have all heard those stories. It's like grand uncle Jim. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's first of all, one of the things I love most about microdosing is that it's such a beautiful, gentle, subtle way to start your healing. Most people who are going to get into trouble, and the stories that we hear about are people who did no preparation and they went off and did ayahuasca with no preparation or did a high dose ceremony on their own. And it makes all the difference in the world to be intentional, be reverential with the medicine, and work toward creating a relationship with the medicine before you launch into it. So it's so different than kind of a drug experience. It's not what the intention ever was and is. So it's, I like to say the mushrooms are not at fault, it's the human. It's our human use of them and abuse of things that get us into trouble. So leading with education, really taking your time, listening and learning, stepping into communities, working with a guide, doing your homework, and just learning about it first will really, really give you the confidence to get beyond kind of the clickbait stories that we see going around.
So with that, can you microdose on your own, or is it something that you probably should have some support?
Great question. So yes, you can. I mean, I did. I did because when I started, I didn't know there weren't a lot of things to go on. And so a lot of my initial program was created around my own experience and kind of helping people understand the process and what it feels like and what you're moving through, because it's so counter to what we're taught healing looks like in so many ways. That said, most people benefit enormously by having a microdosing guide, a coach, a community, even a friend that you're doing it with, because it's such a relational medicine and it's so subtle. Like a lot of people will start out and say, I don't know, maybe I feel a little bit uplifted, but I don't know that much is going on. But this just happened and this just happened. And I reacted to this differently. And so sometimes it's the relation and the mirroring that you need to really see how different you are. It kind of creeps up on you in a lot of ways.
So, like, can we drive if we microdose? Can we like go about our day? Like, will people notice?
Yes, great question. So, my clients, I work with a lot of people, it sounds like you do too, who are very active in life. They're very engaged with life. They have a lot of responsibility. They have a lot going on. And they'll say to me, they're like, Kayse, I'm curious about this, but I can't be weird, like ever, ever. It can't be the slightest weird in any facet of my life. And so that's why it's nice to start with microdosing again, because I'm telling you, you're not going to be trippy in any way. You're not going to be altered in any way. Just start out. And very quickly you realize, like, not only are you not checked out, you're actually way more dialed in than you ever have been. You're more articulate, focused, clear. Your energy grows in coherence. So it's very funny to witness, because some of my people that were most worried about feeling altered are now the people that are like giving speeches in front of thousands of people, and they want to make sure they have their microdose that day.
Okay. So, other than the mushrooms, are there any other substances that react well to people for microdosing? Like, I'm just trying to think about like more like stress related or like maybe migraines again, something like that.
Yes, yes. So psilocybin for sure in terms of headaches and any nervous system dysregulation, psilocybin is so healing for. Um, Other people, like for one, a lot of people aren't sleeping right now. A lot of people who are having a lot of anxiety about the world. It's very, this year it's just putting people a little bit on edge. And amanita is a beautiful mushroom. Amanita muscaria is the little red, cute little Christmas mushroom with the little white dots on it
Oh.
that you see on Christmas cards. So that is a different type of mushroom that can also be used medicinally. And that particular mushroom is really, really good for sleep and really, really calming the thing. So it's beautiful as you get into microdosing. A lot of people start with one medicine. And then as you gain fluency with that medicine, you may want to work at different aspects of self and work with different medicines.
So you mentioned sleep. I know that we have more recent studies now that like if you drink alcohol and you go to sleep, you're not getting restorative sleep. If you smoke marijuana and you go to sleep, you're not getting restorative sleep. Have there been any studies on microdosing and are you getting the restorative sleep?
Yes, I don't know if there have been scientific research studies specifically on that, but from what I have witnessed, absolutely, it's helps people sleep and restorative sleep. And one of the greatest signs of that is many people start dreaming for the first time in years. Lots of people say I have not been able to remember my dreams, or some people say I've never dreamt, and it's for the first time ever they're getting into those deeper stages of sleep for the first time. So absolutely. Yeah, I mean, alcohol is the opposite energy so much of this practice. Sometimes people come in and they're like, "Oh, I'm so used to having a glass of wine to relax and unwind, and I rely on that to calm my nervous system down so that I can sleep." But then they're like, "But I'm waking up in the middle of the night from the alcohol," especially women once they get into the 40s, 50s, super, super common. And so what I've seen happen is microdosing is such a different energy than alcohol that many, many people stop drinking altogether when they start. I think we're going to see this more and more and more coming forward is people who are moving off of alcohol for health reasons and emotional reasons. Alcohol feels good in the moment, but it's actually quite a depressant. Versus microdosing, it actually helps you. Your energy is lighter and brighter and more radiant. So it just very natural. People let go of alcohol.
Mm. So, other than like, let's say for pain or anxiety and stress, what are some other ways that it can help you, like other conditions?
Oh gosh, so many. So one remarkable one I've seen is women's reproductive health and related hormonal things. Like a lot of women I've worked with have very, very severe periods and PMDD. It's kind of like supercharged PMS where you can't function. Where for some of them it's been decades where they've done like every drug, every training, every program, and it's ruinous to their life and their relationships. Like 8, 10 days of every month, we've seen absolutely remarkable balancing, healing, like in a short amount of time. Sometimes women are like, for the first time ever, I can't tell the difference between my first half and my second half of my cycle for the first time ever. Um, so that has been huge. Hormonal balance and just regulation of cycles in general, which totally makes sense. I mean, as we connect with nature again, we kind of retrack our bodies and our pace of our bodies with the cycles of nature. So that's been deeply restorative. And then the other thing I see people really, really interested now is developing a relationship with their self intuition, self trust, and spiritual development. That's really, really been coming up a lot in the last year in our practice. So lots and lots of different beautiful benefits.
So, how does somebody who, let's say, they're not ready to go to you yet and they want to try on their own, what kind of dosage should they start with?
Great question. So the if you go down the interwebs of research, it's funny. A few years ago, the problem was there wasn't enough information out there, and so people were often coming like, "I don't even know where to start. Where do I start?" Now there's almost too much information and conflicting information and authorities on TikTok, and people are like, "I don't know what's true. I don't know what to go on." So this is a great question to inquire of people who've been doing this work for some time versus say going on TikTok. Don't do that. Um, so to answer your question, if you kind of conventional wisdom right now is a microdose when you're talking about psilocybin is somewhere between 100 and 200 milligrams standard. However, I tend to work with a lot of very spiritually open people, very empathic people, sensitive people, people who've done a lot of healing work, had a lot of therapy, have contemplative practices. And I've noticed the more work and preparation people have done, the smaller their dose is. So for people who are especially like, I really don't want to feel weird at all. I'd rather feel not enough than too much. We tend to start around 50, which is actually quite small. So I think most people will find that a little bit higher is their sweet spot, but it's totally fine to start low and go slow and work your way up.
So, after you microdose, how long before you feel anything?
Oh, great question. So some people literally feel it right away, days, like the first day, the second day, they'll feel a noticeable difference. Other people, it takes a few weeks to connect with the medicine. And typically, this is because they need to move some energy first. Sometimes that is kind of stuck, stagnant energy. Sometimes it's grief. Grief is a very common one because it's not something we readily accept in our society, right? We're very fearful of it, especially around death and loss. So a lot of people who say lost a parent, lost a pet a couple years ago, they realize like I did really feel it fully. They didn't grieve it fully, and so sometimes people need to move some energy, move some emotion. Some tears will come up, some density will come out of the body, and so you need to go through that kind of energetic detox for a bit before you can really, really then you move it, and the benefits come in, and you could really connect at that point.
Hmm. When you're going to microdose, is there any sort of intention setting at play or anything to make it more effective?
Yes, absolutely. So all of our participants come with their intentions, their hopes, their desires, and we always encourage people to hold an intention versus an expectation because very often medicine and spirit will deliver so much more to you than you realize if you don't set your parameters so tiny and so like try to control it so much. So yes, like I said in the beginning, a lot of people come for physical reasons at first or say mental health reasons. But over time, as they evolve in their practice, people will start off wanting to help their headaches, but then a year later, their headaches aren't an issue anymore. So they want to work on their emotional self or they want to work on their spiritual development and different things. So each person's process is really, really incredibly unique in terms of kind of the arc of the timing of things. But that's the beauty of working with a guide and especially a group and community because you can see people's experience who are a little bit ahead of you and a little bit behind you in the process. And so chances are, if you're not experiencing what someone else is now, it's just a matter of time, right?
Mm. And is there anyone who probably shouldn't microdose?
Great question. I would say the number one thing that I have seen, and a question I ask if I think it might be, on the edge during their intake is if someone is in a really, really raw state of emotion, like they're almost wanting to microdose to escape or move faster through a really difficult situation. So, an example would be, if you're in the middle of a really contentious divorce or you just lost your pet 2 days ago, like if you can't imagine your emotionality being raised more than it is today, that's not the right time to start microdosing. You want to kind of level out and get a little bit grounded, where you're not so tender and so raw because mushrooms do create more. It's an amplified effect of our feeling body. So that's really honestly the main contraindication I see. And in that case, it's not that you can't microdose. I would just suggest starting with lifestyle practices, meditation, yoga, movement practices, breath work, till you can kind of move out of this place where you're kind of so pinned at your peak.
So you had mentioned seizures, right? Could this be okay for people of all ages? Because I think, there's some younger people that have these issues. Maybe it would be beneficial to them, or is it you have to be a certain age?
Great question, too. So, a lot of people, a lot of parents, especially last year, I had this wave of parents calling asking, can microdosing help my child? There were a lot of teenagers in crisis and young adults in crisis. And yes, you can. But I encourage them. One thing to keep in mind is microdosing really opens our minds up. And that's not necessarily the issue when we're young. Like when we're young, our brains are still growing and we're really bendy and pliable and we're like sponges, right? So the dosing is going to be very, very different for a teenager than it would be for an 80-year-old whose brain is very rigid and in those canals. So that's one thing to keep in mind is probably the dose will be so low, and to really get underneath like what is going on. Is it really a biological issue that's going on with the kid? Is it spiritual? Is it emotional with your kid? Most parents that I've worked with tend to have their own microdosing experience first. And so they can really get connected and understand how the medicine works. And then they would share it with their family in the right context. And that has happened. That has happened quite frequently that family members wind up practicing together.
Hmm. So, how do you see microdosing being incorporated in our society in like a safe way with respect to other medicines?
Hmm. My dream, as well as what I see organically happening, 5 years ago it was a dream, but now it's actually happening, is I really see microdosing being woven into other healing arts and other practices. So I see therapists bringing it into their various therapy practices. I see breath workers bringing it into breath work. I see massage therapists and body workers incorporating it in. It's really so integrating and additive, and it's best in relationship to other lifestyle practices. You're going to get way more out of microdosing when you pair it with lifestyle practices than you would if you just treat it like a pill you're taking.
And I don't know anything about like microdosing or getting anything. So I'm like wondering, how much does this cost?
It's super affordable. Because I think, thankfully, for the time being, it's outside of the pharmaceutical for-profit model, especially if you are growing your own medicines at home. It becomes very, very affordable. The way it goes, people often go, "Well, how long does it will take me to get the hang of it?" Truthfully, we've seen a lot of people move through this. It's a learning curve like any new art and skill, but usually it takes people 3 or 4 months totally to like get the hang of it. But once you get the hang of it, the problem becomes you have so much. You're like, what do I do with this? So growing at home, and then also the medicine itself is not very expensive. And then in terms of your support, there's lots and lots of options. So I do everything, for example, from one-on-one coaching to group work to I have a really, really accessible, low-cost community. If people don't want to invest a lot of money, but they do want live coaching and they want community and to meet other people and kind of get good information and education, we have a community that's very, very accessible. It's just $22 a month right now.
Okay. So I have some like weird questions just for my
Hit
own personal
hit me,
benefit.
hit me. I love
Okay,
I love
so
the
like
weird ones.
yes, is it better to take it in the morning or in the evening before bed, with food, without food? Can I have coffee with it?
That's very up top of mind to a lot of people. Don't make me stop my coffee. You don't have to stop your coffee. Some people choose to, but you absolutely don't have to. So those are great questions and very common questions. So most people opt to, with their microdosing with mushrooms, tend to microdose in the morning or the early afternoon and have the only reason they do that is to be able to experience the effects during the day. Again, you're not going to feel altered and trippy, but you are going to feel great, ideally, right? So you want to have the ability to kind of be conscious and awake. Occasionally, people, and this happens especially with men, so interesting, a lot of people start dreaming very powerfully, vivid, healing dreams, reclamation dreams, just beautiful. And they're so stoked to have this experience that they want to dose at night to kind of invite the medicine a little bit more in their dream state. So that can happen. There's no right or wrong. And I
Mhm.
always encourage people, once you connect, we've seen people do all kinds of creative things. Like sometimes people are like, I think I'm going to split my dose up. I want to do half of my dose at noon and half of my dose in the evening before bed. And we're like, okay, that works out really well for them. So there's no right or wrong. Um, Depending on the form of the medicine, to your question, like, can I eat, not eat? Sometimes when people are taking raw or dehydrated mushrooms like itself, the chitin in the mushroom can cause some digestive issues with mushrooms. That's pretty common. If you hear people talk about mushrooms, sometimes people feel nauseous or have a stomach ache. When you use finished medicines, meaning like capsules, chocolates, tablets, you're not going to have that issue. So it's really up to you to take it before food, after food. I have found when it's a finished medicine, it doesn't really matter. When it's mushrooms and you're cultivating your own, sometimes having some food in your stomach before can kind of help assist that. And yes, you can have coffee.
Good. Wonderful. All right. So tell us a little bit about your workshop for beginners and how everybody can find you and learn more and where they can go, and also where can they buy this stuff if they're interested, or where can they buy the mushrooms to grow?
Yes, absolutely. So the workshop I created for beginners because people tend to have a lot of very similar questions that we covered a lot of them. But if there was somebody had a question that we didn't hit today, it's likely in that workshop. So I have an 80-minute workshop downloadable. It's free for anybody on our website at microdosingforhealing.com. And then our community is really the ideal way for a beginner to just step in who you really just want to take your time to learn. It's so empowering just to sit back a couple calls and listen to other people's experience. You'll gain so much confidence and be so inspired just in a couple calls. So that's a really, really good way to start and step in a really accessible way. Once people sign up for that, we have vetted high integrity sourcing partners that you get access to. So it's really easy. We just say, go here. If you're in England, go here. If you're in Canada, go here. So it's someone that I know all of them personally, and I know their intention they hold behind them. So that's how we shape it.
Awesome. So I'm going to leave all that information in the show notes so everybody can go and check everything out. And it's microdosingforhealing.com. Is there anything else you would like to leave the audience with before we go?
Thank you. No, I just so appreciate the opportunity to share at this point. It's this year, it's really on the cusp of such a whole new audience, learning about microdosing, learning what it is, overcoming a lot of the conditioning and the stigma around it. And so what we're doing right here, people sharing and listening to the practice is a huge opportunity that I'm really grateful for. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being with us and sharing today. And thank you to the audience for watching, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Start the revolution, let the truth begin. Wake up, they're feeding lies. Control the media's got you hypnotized. Trust authority, they'll take your soul. Break the chains, find your own control. Wake